next line,
Mm-hmm.
who hung around with lepers, hookers, and crooks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so sorry for the language there, but that's the way it's written here. I think the first question I would ask is define hung out.
Yeah, right.
Like who he hung around with.
Right.
What do you mean he hung around with them?
Mm-hmm.
Like what are you connotating? So why don't we just start with the lepers?
Right.
And let's take a look at his activity with lepers.
Mm-hmm.
Mark 1:40 through 45. And a man with leprosy came to Jesus, imploring him and kneeling down and saying to him, "If you are willing, you can make me clean."
Mm-hmm.
Moved with compassion, Jesus reached out with his hand and touched him and said to him, "I am willing, be cleansed." And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was cleansed. And he sternly warned him and immediately sent him away and said to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded as a testimony to them."
Mm-hmm.
But he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the news around to such an extent that Jesus could no longer publicly enter a city, but stayed out in unpopulated areas, and they were coming to him from everywhere.
Yeah.
So when we look at this story, a leper asks for healing.
Right.
Jesus does it, and then he asks him not to tell anyone.
Right.
So like that doesn't really sound like hanging around.
He also specifically tells him he sends him away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not saying that he couldn't have stayed, but Jesus is like, all right, you're good. See you, man.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he's not like, hey, come sit with me. You
Right.
know, like,
Yeah, and then because people knew that he hung out with lepers, he was no longer able to enter the city.
right.
Some of this is because the crowds were too big.
Right.
Some of it is also because he's not lawfully allowed to enter the city because he had contact with a leper.
Leper. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
He's deemed unclean. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now this brings us to a point. Jesus did touch the leper even though he was not supposed to.
Yes.
Right? So if we are to live like Jesus, and this is my question for you.
Right.
If we're looking at how Jesus deals with the leper and the thing that he did that was so revolutionary and so caring and hanging around with them was that he touched them when he wasn't supposed to. He went against the rules of the quarantine.
Yeah. Jesus would have been terrible during COVID-19.
Yeah. So should we not wear masks or quarantine or social distance?
Right. Yeah.
Right? Is that what you're advocating for? I think the author of this would say no.
Sure.
But you're saying that that's what Jesus did.
Right.
He said, it's more important that I spend time with this person
Right.
than I abide by these things.
Right.
But that's not what the progressive Christian taught during COVID.
Right. Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
There's a contradiction here.
Yeah. Now,
Yes.
and again, this story, he's not hanging out with this guy.
Right.
He has met him. He's
associated with them.
Yes.
Yes. As we like to say, he's an acquaintance.
Right. So what about Simon the leper?
Right.
Okay, so maybe this is what we're talking about.
Right.
Jesus does eat at Simon the leper's house.
Yeah.
Who is also called Simon the Pharisee.
Right.
If he was an actual leper at the time of this encounter,
Right.
he would not have had a house in the city.
He also would not be a Pharisee
Yeah, he also would not
because they would be unclean and could not therefore do the things the Pharisees did.
Right.
Right.
So the question we have to ask, so we know that when he was hanging out with Simon, Simon wasn't a leper.
Right. Post leper, maybe.
Yeah.
Been clean, gone through the rituals. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So all we have is the first leper.
Yeah.
Does healing a leper equate to hanging out with them? Not really.
I mean, it says that he eats with the tax collectors. Did he hang out? You know what I mean? Just because you eat with somebody, does it mean you hang around with them?
Well, we're going to get to that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So why don't we talk about prostitutes?
Yeah, sure.
Right? So does Jesus have actual interaction with prostitutes? Luke 7:37 says this. And there was a woman in the city who was a sinner. And when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, Simon the Pharisee, she brought an alabaster vial of perfume. Okay. This passage in Luke is the one that is understood as a woman having been a prostitute.
Right.
It's the translation of the word sinner, right? It's also derived from the response of others at the table. They basically are like, if Jesus knew who this was, he wouldn't let her touch him. Right. But Jesus refutes them by then telling a parable about people being forgiven. He basically says those who've been forgiven a lot show more gratitude. Right? So this is interesting. So his point is she's no longer a prostitute.
Right.
She's repentant.
She's not actively prostituting. Right.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And then he turns around and he roasts the host for not even offering to wash his feet.
Yeah.
Because the host doesn't feel like he needs to do anything because he doesn't feel like he needs to be forgiven
Right.
for any of his sin.
Right.
Right. Now, there's also the adulterous woman in John 8, 1 through 11. But an adulteress is not necessarily a prostitute.
Right.
And they could not lawfully stone her either way because, they didn't have the adulterer.
Right. Right.
And when it's over, Jesus says, hey, stop sinning.
Yeah.
Go and don't sin.
Yeah. Again, not active.
Yeah.
Past tense. Leper. Past tense. I went
Yeah.
to Simon's house. He was a leper. Not no more. He's a Pharisee.
Right.
So that means he, according to rabbinic law, would be
Clean.
So okay, also got a house.
Right.
So was past tense. A lot of times they say Mary is the sinner. Mary Magdalene, she was a prostitute. Not no more. I mean, like again, past tense.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that's the revolutionary thing about Jesus is past doesn't dictate the present. You know.
Now, there's a third woman I want to
Yes.
mention, and this is the woman at the well in John chapter 4, 7 through 26.
Yes.
This one is a little bit more revolutionary. He goes and he teaches this woman who's alone. Now, his disciples are around.
Right.
So it's not like they went off to a room together.
Right.
But this is kind of taboo. Like, he's not supposed to just sit and teach a woman by herself.
Yeah.
But one of the things he does, though, is he does kind of shame her a little bit. He points out that she does not live a righteous lifestyle.
Yeah. In fact, you've had multiple, is what he says.
You've had multiple husbands.
Yes.
Right? Now, she's not a prostitute.
Nope.
But in his preaching to her, he's calling her to repentance of her sexually free lifestyle.
Right. Sure.
Right? So what we have here are the three best examples of Jesus ministering to women who were anything near sex work.
Right.
And in two of them, he calls them to repentance.
Right.
And in the first one, he receives her praise because she is repentant.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So is he hanging out with them?
Yeah.
Is he like, hey, you do you, boo?
Right.
No, that's not what's happening here. Right?
Right.
Okay. So then that gets us to the crooks, right? Because remember, we had the lepers, we had the hookers,
The hookers and the crooks.
and the crooks, right? So obviously, Judas was stealing. I don't think, though, that anybody looks at Judas as the example for this one, though.
Right.
Nobody's looking at Judas and saying that Jesus approved of his behavior.
Right.
Because he betrayed him. Right. And he also responds to him when the woman breaks the alabaster thing. Well, when the former prostitute does this, Judas is the one that's like, hey, we could have used that money to.
Yeah, we could have bought some poor stuff.
Yeah,
for
we
the
could have
poor.
done that stuff. And Jesus is like, yeah, you're stealing.
You just would have take some off the top.
Right.
Yeah.
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 So Judas is an example of a crook that he hung out with.
Right.
He's probably the only crook. Well, there's one more.
Yeah.
That he hung out with. Right. I'd say the other one would be the tax collectors. Right. These guys would identify, or we would identify them as crooks.
Sure.
So Matthew 9, 10 through 13. Let's read that. Then it happened that as Jesus was reclining at the table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and began dining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, why is your teacher eating with the tax collectors and sinners? But when Jesus heard this, he said, it is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. Now go and learn what this means. I desire compassion rather than sacrifice, for I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Okay, this is the closest thing that we see to hanging out.
Yeah, for sure.
It's also possibly a goodbye celebration for Matthew.
Right.
Matthew was a tax collector.
Matthew's just become a Christian, basically. Yeah.
He
leaving the fold.
Christ,
Yep.
quits tax collecting, and he goes and he follows Christ.
Yeah.
So when questioned about this, Jesus states that he's only with them
To call them to repentance.
to call them to repentance.
That he calls them sick.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what he tells. That's what he tells the Pharisees when they knock. They says, "Who needs a physician?"
Right.
And it's kind of ironic because it's like, Jesus, we hear you. But he's making the point.
Yeah. And he makes the point that what he's doing is compassionate.
Right.
That convincing them of their sin and that their need of repentance is a compassionate thing to do.
Right.
So this is the closest thing we see to hanging out.
Right.
So, and then let's take a look at this. I think there's something interesting here. So Matthew 18, 15 through 17. Now, if your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen to you, take one or two more with you, so that on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, every matter may be confirmed. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to even to the church, he is to be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector.
Right.
Jesus recognizes in this speech that tax collectors are treated differently.
Yes.
And he advocates for treating people differently if they are non-repentant.
Right. Gentiles would
Right.
be everybody else. We've talked about the hookers and the lepers.
Yeah.
They would be considered quote unquote Gentile. You know,
Now,
unclean.
It's important to note he does not say you should treat them without compassion.
Right.
But he does say you should limit their access.
Right, 100%. That's we talked about this a few weeks back when we were doing a sermon series. Like when he's referring to the Gentiles and the tax collectors were allowed to participate at the temple,
Yeah.
but only with the outer gate, which is the court of the Gentiles, because they could not move into the inner parts of worship and the inner parts where sacrifices are made. So basically, what he's saying is you actually need to restrict and limit
Yeah.
these things. It's not you still are nice. You can still talk to them, you can still associate with them, but there are certain things in certain places that there are boundaries being created.
Yeah.
That's his point. And I think that that's a good point to your point is but he had boundaries.
Yes, he did.
He associated with them, but like it wasn't like, hey, this is my buddy, there's boundaries here.
Yeah, Jesus is not just hanging out with undesirable outcasts and people down on their luck.
Right.
He's preaching and he's requiring repentance.
Right. And it just kind of so happens that the people who need to hear that
Yeah.
because of who Jesus is begin to hear that.
Yeah.
And so that's attractional,
Yeah. And oftentimes when he's with them, he's celebrating their repentance.
Right.
He's inviting them to live new lives and he's healing them.
The reality is if the Pharisees were more receptive, he probably would have ate with them a lot more too.
Yeah.
You know what I
And
mean?
he did eat with the Pharisees.
right.
Like, again, we've talked about this before, but like, do not build your theology on who Jesus ate with.
Right.
Build your theology on what Jesus said to them.
Right. Exactly right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's where your
100%.
theology is found, right?
For sure.
All right. So I think we covered that line.
Yeah.